Welcome to the Organizational Transformation Kung Fu Podcast with your hosts, Sandy Verrecchia and Jennifer Long.
Welcome to Organizational Transformation Kung Fu. Today we're going to be talking about the culture of retention, because that is a big topic in the work environments that both Jen and I work in today, and just anything that you Google about what's happening in the workplace today. So I'm really pleased to be here with my friend Jen Long from Colorado, from Management Possible. Hey, Jen.
How you doing, Sandy? Nice to see you.
Yeah, you as well, because we can't see each other because we're on video conference, although no one else can see us. So really pleased, they're really excited to talk about this. So just a little background about who we are. So Jen and I got together a number of years ago when we met and became fast friends. And we started this Organizational Transformation Kung Fu podcast, really to focus on deliberate change within organizations, because we both felt that change happens, but it's not always. People want immediate gratification, and we feel that how we've named it, that it takes time and patience and follow through for change to actually happen. So we have followed this train of thought, and through the pandemic and all these different crazy things that have happened to us. And here we are today talking about a culture of retention and what organizations need to think about in this really chaotic time of quiet quitting, and all the sort of the coined phrases that we're hearing today. So welcome, Jen.
Thank you very, very much. Yeah, Sandy and I sort of were sitting around thinking, what is the issue? What is the thing? And what will help you as we come in on this fourth quarter to start to think about getting some discipline and some practice around for 2023. And it really is keeping the butts in the seats, getting new butts in the seats to do the work, right? It seems like no matter where you go, whether you're in retail, in hospitality, in manufacturing, every industry is short people. Don't have enough people to do the work, to deliver the services, to do all the things. And it's kind of an interesting state of affairs. So what are you all thinking? What is the best practice or good practice or emerging practice around retaining your folks and keeping especially the ones with all of the working knowledge that have been with you for a while in the organization? And that is what we are going to kind of explore a little bit deeper. So I don't know, Sandy, if you've got an initial thought around.
Yeah. Your opening comments are so true. One of the things that makes me think is a lot of some of the industries that I work in have very long tenured people, and they are shocked to see these people leaving. And you wonder, why they're shocked, right? Is, because, we're not going to have people stay forever, but is it because they weren't proactive in kind of giving these people the love that they needed? Where are these people going, and why now, right? And we know the pandemic has shifted people's perspectives and what's valuable to them, and have made good on their promise to be true to their values, which has created a hole in many organizations. But as we head into 2023, still in this state of flux, it's really, what do organizations need to start to shift and think about in order to add more value to the employee-employer relationship, so that people aren't wanting to leave or think twice about leaving, or just really want to stay because they are so engaged.
Right. And one of the tools that one of my clients used to kind of look at it, right? Part of it is how much, what's your investigation? What are you looking for? Right. And engagement surveys have been a mainstay of trying to understand where people are. What do we think about where we are in terms of our level of engagement, and what kind of planning, or what are we doing with those results? Because a lot of companies spend the time to get them, and then do they follow through with that? Do they actually do any action planning that says, here's what we're going to do to take on that we score really low in my opinions count, or whatever it might be if you're doing the Gallup survey.
Right.
The other thing that they've investigated using are what's called a stay survey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you ask the people, right? Why is it you're still here, and what would cause you not to be, and trying to really confront head on, asking the questions of, outside just engagement, what are the other things that are impacting whether or not you stay or go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other is exit interviews, which is after the fact and really doesn't help all that much unless you put some action plans to really, do something to mitigate if there was something that was really happening. So, what are you finding? So, a lot of my clients, I'm hearing a lot about these surveys as well, these stay surveys. Are you finding that people are truthful?
Um, yeah and no, right? I mean, there's a colleague I work with, and we make big jokes about the fact that everyone lies on surveys. And so, if you're in an exit survey, maybe you're just lambasting people because you had it, and you need to get things off your chest. But um, I think people ask for things that they know that the company really can't deliver on. Like, it's just unrealistic to give everybody, across the board massive raises. That the economics of that just doesn't play out. Um, but I think what they are finding is that they get themes across certain demographics. Women, for example, who have the continued load share in terms of family and the caregiving and all of that kind of thing. And the pandemic really made that very, very pressing, right? With the schools, in school, we're in school, we're out of school, and that, just having to deal with that whole thing. And while I think the schools have stabilized to some degree, it still is an issue, especially for all of the aging parents and whatnot, and the caregiving that has to happen in addition to that. So they
That's right.
find that there's a lot of commonality among women who are exiting the workforce because taking care of family is just taken over.
And has not it was never not a priority, but it has shifted. The pandemic
Mhm.
has really shone a light on that, and you're right. But so yeah, so I'm hearing that as well, and I'm seeing that in a lot of the organizations. A lot of people are making those life choices from a development standpoint. Then, how do you what leadership skills do we think are needed in organizations to help identify this before it gets to the point where somebody quits?
Well, I think when you talk about where leaders are, is really kind of um, re-examining where are they in the hybrid culture, decision making and policy making. A lot of companies brought people back in, and I think that there's a little bit of backlash around that.
Yes.
There was a real sense of unevenness there, and a hybrid policy really is a polarity almost with equity, right? So
Mhm.
if you're big on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, the hybrid thing is not necessarily always equitable, especially if you're dealing with manufacturing environments or service
Exactly.
environments, right? Where, being on site, not all work demands that. And so I think there is a struggle for leaders to really kind of get their arms around, what does that want to be? And do we really need to have a standard? Or if we make it manager specific, does that make it more work related, or is it more in tune with what a manager's comfort level is?
Right.
Right?
Right.
'Cause, like, well, what they would say, it should be work specific. If you're doing the kind of work that worked fine in the pandemic, why are we all coming back? Well,
Mm.
maybe the manager's like, well, because I'm more
I've
comfortable.
worked in the office for 30 years and therefore everybody else should.
Right. And I'd really like you to be here 3 days, or, 4 and one work from home day. And I
Just like
think
to
people
see
are
your
like
face.
calling bullshit on that.
Yeah.
So
Yes, they
that,
are. Yeah, so I was saying before we started, I was in Dallas doing a roundtable on on this very topic. And so I did a whole little survey of my clients and non-clients and saying, what's going on? Like, what kind of policy do you have? And hybrid, and majority of them are hybrid, without a doubt. A few have said, without a doubt, no, everybody has to come in the office. And you kind of ask them why, and they say, because you get more work done, essentially something like that. But the hybrid thing, I only had one organization that said, we are going to leave it up to the managers to decide who comes into the office or not. And they took a completely different, they don't have a policy around it. It's more, if you get the work done, you get the work done. If you want to come in the office, come in the office. If you don't, you don't. And they've put more energy into the conversation around, what does it look like? How do we let our colleagues know where we are? How do we get the communication going, which strengthens that bond between the employee and the employer. So when people are thinking, maybe I want to leave, maybe maybe my balance isn't right, there's more of an opportunity to talk to your manager about what it is that you need and why your work arrangement could look like whatever it might look like. But there isn't a policy per se that everybody has to fit into.
Right. Right. And I think that's as a manager, that's a big challenge, or, to exert all the energy, right? I've got these guys doing this, these guys on my team doing this, these other people prefer to come in. And if you're really moving from a work preference mindset, how does that impact your ability to track it all, manage it all effectively? And I've gotten mixed responses in terms of the people I'm coaching. Some people handle it beautifully. They've learned to build the relationships one to one. They've learned to have the conversations. They've learned to increase their versatility and are kind of just riding that wave every day. They're like, what's the need? But then there are others who are just struggling to even out. They're having this expectation of, we need to arrive at a way.
Yes.
And they just don't have the energy to do what it takes to, because when you're at distance, right, more energy to work remote, more energy when you are at distance to create connectivity, to create conversation, to all of those things. If the organization is willing to run with the experimenting and see where what is it about your organization that's uniquely supportive of this kind of thing, right? And are you looking in an integrated way across your organization to find out what the differences are, right? And not to integrate it necessarily, but looking at it going, we have a lot of diversity and that's okay.
Yeah.
Or are you looking at it to integrate it more into a common policy because you're more worried about is there a level of equity no matter where you work in the organization, that you have an opportunity to work in the same capacity? So I don't know
Well, I
that
think
there's
the
an
other
answer.
component to that is that there's the
Yeah.
equity component, but I also think, going back to that, when I was doing that session, I had a couple of questions. One of the questions was, how do we track what they're doing? So it really
Yeah.
comes back to that, right? So it's the
Yeah.
equity. So do we need a policy? But often I'm finding that it comes down to, we need to see them, have eyes on them, little eyeballs on them, because that's when we know that they're working. And I said, I don't think things have changed since the pandemic. Like, people did their work, and you didn't micromanage them then. And so why do we have to micromanage? Why can't we manage to outcomes? But you're right. It's the effort that managers have to expel in order to do it right, in order to engage more, that
Yeah.
because you're not just doing the flyby. And so I think about, the disc agility, right? And where people's strengths are and where they need to stretch into their comfort zones that they're not good at. That would be an excellent exercise for managers to see how, if their communication style is one way, what are they missing that they could stretch into or lean into, that they don't know, like, where are they not excelling? right? So when
Right.
thinking about each of the employee being different, what do the employees need, and can you as a manager actually give that?
Right, which kind of leads into the whole development side of the conversation, right? And in I think a lot of organizations pushed pause during the pandemic on doing
Mm-hmm.
targeted development work, or they just, push pause on traditional programs. And if you had a big e-learning environment, great, that was all still available. But because of the chaos, people weren't investing really the time and effort to do development work. And that's kind of on the comeback of, if I'm going to stick with you, what are you going to do to develop me? And some of this is really kind of, what have you developed, and what are you continuing to develop to provide the kind of skills for this level of volatility, this level of difference in styles of how, what do you need to be able to stretch yourself to work in multiple environments effectively and have that not be such a drain.
Mm-hmm. So 2023 is really about retention, but you're getting at retention through development,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
Putting your
and really
emphasis
kind
and
of
focus back.
rethinking, yeah, what are career paths look like now when you don't have the proximity, when people don't just when you were used to being around and being seen, and now you're not. So how are you thinking about the push pull of development and pathways for people in your organization? Because that's also, I think, a challenge when it comes to a retention kind of strategy of,
Mhm.
what are we really doing to get employees aware, bought in on, acclimated to, and managers acclimated to different kinds of development paths and the skill set that these kind of environments require.
Right, right. And I think it almost dictates or demands, I guess is a better word, that two-way conversation. So, the development is going to land with the manager and creating those paths, but employees need to ask for what they need. They may not get it, but they need to be able to vocalize what they want and to see if a new path can be drawn. Because I think,
Right. 100%. I mean, it's always, when we get to the end of the year performance review thing, it's always, how much is the employee doing the talking? Because at the end of the day, it's their career. And what are you doing as managers and leaders to really investigate, how do you see your career here? What do you want that we're not currently providing? Is that something we can actually accommodate? And just because you don't see it anywhere on the horizon or within the culture itself, is there a potential to start something different? Is there a potential to create different kinds of roles and paths that we didn't see before because we weren't working in this way? And I think that's
yeah.
an exploratory, that should be part of every review. And then what are leaders doing at the end of performance reviews, as a leadership group, to say, what are you hearing?
Right, right. And I don't know about you. I only have one organization that actually happens. The HR department gets together, the HR leads get together, and they talk about, what did you hear in yours, and what did I hear in mine, and what are the common themes, and what do we need to do differently to empower our workforces and to offer our HR expertise to another level. And it's brilliant, right? Because it brings the HR team together more, but it
Sure.
also then says you were listened to.
Right. And even get your operations team to have a conversation. Here's what all our people were talking about. Here's the common themes, right? Look at all the aspects of your business, and are your leaders really doing a hot wash after performance reviews to say, here's the stuff I'm dealing with, here's the stuff that I heard in terms of development, here's the ideas, right? Because why is it some person in organizational development trying to figure out, based on what other companies are doing, right? What's out there, how we should handle it.
Yeah, this is the perfect canvas, I think, for change right now.
Mhm.
Like we've come through this 2 years of 3 years, whatever, of pandemic. People are working differently. What we knew to be true was different. The work is different. How we work is different, and management needs to be different. Leadership needs to be different. And if nothing else, anybody listening to this podcast should go back to their organization saying, what are we doing with all the rich information that we're getting from our end of the year assessments? Because it's not just about, does Susie get a raise? It's like,
Right.
what else does Susie need? And are there multiple people across the organization needing something similar? And what can we do then to meet that need? Different
Exactly.
conversations.
Well, and I think, for everybody who wants to just breathe out and relax and go back into a rhythm, no, we're still in a place of experimentation. We're still in a place of, once we understand what all this data tells us, our stay surveys, our performance review, hot wash, whatever it is that we're collecting, and when we get that information, what is the tension that you are understanding, and then what kind of experiment might you run based on those tensions? And that might be multiple experiments, right? Operations may want something, HR may need something else, right? The people who are actually on site more may want something different. How are you and I think, you know listeners might be like, "Oh God, when does it end?" When and I think this is the new skill set, is dealing with this kind of experimental environment where let's just see how it runs, right? What are we getting from that? And because what that says to employees, right? You said it a minute ago, is we hear you, and because we heard you, we're going to try this thing. Based on how it goes, we might keep it, we might not. So if you're interested, join the experiment. If you're, we'll report out, because what that said, what that creates a learning organization, which is part of your culture. And so
Right.
by virtue, right, of how you invest in, embrace this kind of shifting, changing kind of environment, forces you to be a learning organization. Maybe if you weren't before, right? And if you weren't before, that's why you probably keep thinking, where's the answer? Is there just one answer for everyone? Versus there's probably multiple answers, and let's figure out which one is more successful, or if we've got a couple that are really successful, and how do we do that?
It's funny. What's coming to mind is, we talk about the different leadership competencies, right? And kind of innovation's one of them, the buzzwords that's always around, and
Mhm.
how do we make our managers innovative and things like that. But I am wondering, just in kind of what you were saying, like, is the competency innovation, or is the competency to being able to experiment? Like, is it
Yeah.
like, have we just coined a new competency? Like, honestly, because that's what it is. Like, the next 3 years, it's all about experimentation until, maybe things will never settle down. But whatever, that new normal or whatever it is, we're far from it.
Yeah, yeah, and we were forced to innovate, to address just
Hmm.
the environmental circumstances, and so I think the expectation that that stopped is what's people is misleading, because it hasn't.
Hmm.
It really hasn't, and
Hmm.
I feel like this new world of work is this. It's still settling. It's still readjusting. It's still, and it may settle down at some point in the future, but I feel like 2023 is the year to, you know, just embrace the,
Yeah.
and ride the wave. And I was talking to a couple of frustrated leaders who kept saying, "Oh, they were feeling disappointed, and they were being hard on themselves, because they're like, I don't seem to be able to get to where I think I want to go. I feel like I'm always falling short with my team, and I can't reach this end state that I imagine that I need to be at for them to all feel okay," or whatever it might be. And I said, it's a mistake to think there's an end state,
Hmm.
right? Is you need to manage your team these days is more like walking down to the beach and looking at the waves and going, how do I ride my board today?
Hmm.
Right? Is it choppy water? Am I gonna have to paddle more because it's a rough sea? Is it gonna be right? And to not judge yourself on, I wasn't able to get there. It's like, how did you ride the water today? Did you read it? Were
Hmm.
you paying attention? Were you responsive? And did you spend most of the day on your board or underwater? on your board is a good day, right? And can you keep all your people on their boards, right? And when you get at the end of the quarter, do you all go to the bar and talk about it, right?
Yeah, the ways that you had to rhyme. That's a great analogy. Because, one of the things that I hear a lot is that, and not in the same terms, but people are underwater. They are
Yeah,
like they're treading water and they're underwater 90% of the time.
yeah.
And um, trying to figure out how to get above and be on that board. And that's a real struggle, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For
Yeah,
managers.
yeah, yeah. So I think it's important that while there's a lot of stuff out there about invest in your employees' careers and focus on the managers and recognize contributions. I think that's all good information, but it's a juggling. It's a
Hmm.
right. It's not one answer.
Well, especially in this environment where leaders are struggling, but employees are struggling because their counterpart just quit and they can't backfill and things like that. So everybody's feeling the burden, the overwork burden. And
Hmm.
so that's why it becomes even more important to focus on this culture of retention that puts you the mindset back into experimentation, the mindset back into development, the
Hmm.
mindset back into what is it as an organization we want to do to give to our employees so that they want to stay, right? So those conversations really need to shift.
Right, right. And I think the big lessons are balance, and balance for people is different depending on balance is contextual, right? And everybody's got context. And so if I'm late career empty nester, my work life balance is going to be different than if I'm new parent, right?
Right.
Than if I'm 20, mid 20s, right? That work life balance is contextual. And what are we doing as organizations to understand balance for people and what that wants to be? So that's a conversation. And the other one, oh gosh, what was I thinking? Flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
right? What is the flexibility, and how are we defining flexible? And is there an organizational cultural norm of flexibility? Is there a cultural flexibility by division? Is there a flexible? I mean, what is that? And that's where I'm talking about that
Mm-hmm.
integration of when we think about flexibility. Is that how are we making that an organizational value that we embody? And when we embody it, maybe that embodiment shows up a little bit differently because it is flexibility, depending on
Right.
what part of the
Right.
organization you're in.
Yeah, and the needs of the people around you, as opposed to, which has happened many times, it's like, well, they're a millennial, therefore that's what they need, right? Have
Yeah,
conversations with your people and actually find out what they need, because just because they fit a contextual social norm doesn't mean that they are that person. So
right.
conversations are critical as you go into 2023.
Right. And don't judge it, because if you want them to tell you the truth, right? We just talked about surveys. People lie on surveys. If you want the transparency, if you want the open understanding of what really is the pulse of the people that work there, right? Don't judge it. Don't roll your eyeballs because you've been in the company so long and oh my God, we tried that so many years ago. And oh my God, context has shifted, right? The things that you tried a long time ago actually might be a good idea to try again,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. All right. So, culture of retention is really where organizations need to focus to kind of get out of this churn of people. The quiet quitters and the people that have quit, but they're still actually sitting in their chairs. We want to be able to and we talked about balance and flexibility. We talked about conversations, development planning, being creative and experiment with change, and not trying to put everything into the proverbial box or process or policy, because that's a word that gets thrown a lot around now. Uh, Find out what people need and be flexible enough to meet them where they are.
Right, right. Because all of these things over time really become the culture. And you'll be amazed at what it really kind of does to create something that's of interest. And why wouldn't people want to work in an environment that is willing to do a little bit of that most of the
Right.
time?
Engage. So the retention's handled, your engagement goes up, and people will want to work there. So you'll get people wanting to come to your organization. So it's all good. It's win-win-win.
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 Win-win-win. Not easy answers, but
No,
hopefully shining a little bit of a light on this helps y'all think about it just a little bit different. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. We would love to see some comments and know what's on your mind. Uh, yeah, share the podcast with your friends.
absolutely. And good luck with your retention.
All
All
right.
right. Thanks, Jen.
All right. Talk to you soon, Sandy.
Thank you for listening, and please visit Sandy's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI consultinginc.ca, and Jen's website at managementpossible.com. Thanks again.